Hello everyone and welcome. I am back from my work trip in Germany and I wanted to start off our deep dive into the Pat McGrath Labs Bijoux Brilliance collection. Now for my first video we are going to actually just see each other, on my desk because I've got way too many things for us to tackle all of this in one video and do looks and comparison swatches and all of that. And to be completely honest with you, since I just got back, I'm really way too tired to show you my face and do any sort of makeup. I've given it some thought on how I want to approach this collection, and what I think I'm going to do is we're going to do this video where firstly we're going to just swatch everything and do some comparison swatches to like similar shades, something that I always do in my new Pat McGrath collection videos. And that's Nicola shouting downstairs. I'm sorry if you can hear that. But I'm going to basically do like the whole swatch portion in a separate video this time around because we've got 5 palettes to tackle here. And we're also going to cover the comparisons today. If I forget something, obviously let me know and then I will cover it in the videos that will be coming up next week. And what I will do next week, since I will be Netherlands bound for next week, the week after I'm going to Denmark, so we will not really have much time besides next week. But I'm going to do each of the quads first next week, and then finally I'm going to cover, I think, the big palette. And for the big palette I will probably try to do 2 looks so that you can have a bit more of an idea how this works, because it is obviously a little bit more comprehensive than just a little Quints here. Did I call them quads before? I meant Quints. Anyway, so this is a little bit how I think this week is going to work out. So it will be a little bit different than what I usually do, but it is also the first time that I'm picking up so many like eyeshadow products from her holiday collection. I think the most I've gotten before is 3 at a time, so you can imagine that we will need to spend a bit more time doing everything. Anyway, this is just a very lengthy introduction and I think you're here for swatches and all of that kind of jazz, so let's get into it. First and foremost, let's swatch maybe the big palette. So the Mega Mothership palettes this year have been split into basically 2 separate palettes, one that is a bit more warm toned and this one which is a little bit more cool toned slash neutral toned. Let me grab one of the Mega Motherships from last year just for reference. So in case you're new to Pat McGrath, for the past 3 years she's been doing these Mega Mothership palettes which come in an 18 eyeshadow palette pen format, and they contain mostly like traditional matte, metallics and sparkly shades, but they do not contain her baked formula. And this year she has changed up the concept and first of all changed up the packaging. Now we get this like, what's this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 octagonal. We get an octagonal type of packaging with not only eyeshadows but also 2 of her divine blushes, so the powder blushes, not the cream blushes, not the baked blushes, but her traditional powder blushes. And instead of 18 eyeshadows you get 9 eyeshadows, and like I said, one palette leans a little bit warmer and this is the one that I picked up, which is a little bit more cool slash neutral toned. Palette comes in the corresponding box. I'll be honest with you, the overall vibe of the packaging of this collection is going to be probably divisive between people. I think some are really going to like it and some are not going to be fans. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan. First of all, it bothers me that we get like a completely different sort of shape. I'm not quite sure that it was necessary to go for an octagonal shape. We could have just gotten the good old rectangular. I don't need fancy shapes when it comes to my eyeshadow palettes. Second of all, I want to mention this is hefty, so if you think you're getting a cardboard packaging that feels very light in the hand, that is not the case. This is quite sturdy in the hands. However, when you look at the finer details, I don't know whether you will see here, it is not the bestest. So I don't know that it will also be the most durable. I think this could be quite prone to damage. To me it is a little bit tacky, not as classy looking as her previous collections. Personally, I far prefer the packaging that she did last year and the year before. I feel like that was still very much Pat McGrath Labs. I think this is just really going to be down to personal taste. The eyeshadow palette that I purchased is called Starstruck Splendor, and this is made in Italy. There is some sort of a myth going around that her eyeshadow palettes coming from the US are not the same quality and are a subpar quality when it comes to the products that come from Italy. I beg to differ, that's my personal opinion. I think that stuff that comes from the US is also of superior quality. The only difference really is that the lab in Italy is the one that makes the baked formulas. But since those haven't really been present in any of her holiday collections in the past 3 years, it's almost pointless to even talk about where these are coming from. So the two blushes that are included in this palette are one which is part of her core line and it is a repeat, this is the shade Nymphette, and one which I believe is a new shade and that is the shade Coral Cosmos. I'm going to swatch both of these for you, but I will also admit that I have already tried them on my cheeks and I was very skeptical when I tried them on my cheeks. So here is Nymphette, which I will describe as a neutral mauve beige kind of shade, slightly deeper I think than something like Flirtatious. And this is the shade Coral Cosmos, which on my skin on a swatch translates as a rather hot pink. So I was in fact quite skeptical, especially about the shade Coral Cosmos, because I was hoping for it to really translate more as a coral. But I tried both of these on my cheeks and they actually look really beautiful, both of them. They look different and I really like how they look on my cheeks. I wanted to quickly compare these two actually to Electric Bloom and Flirtatious, because those are the two that are I think the most similar. So here we've got Flirtatious, here we've got Nymphette, and you can see that Flirtatious is quite much more neutral and almost like cooler in tone. So I'm going to swatch that one right here. I can pull off Flirtatious just fine, and this one being a little bit deeper is actually very flattering against my skin. So I'm actually quite happy with the shade Nymphette. And the other shade that I wanted to compare to is the shade Electric Bloom, which I wanted to compare to the shade Coral Cosmos. Now Coral Cosmos is I think less intense of a shade. I think Electric Bloom is quite a punchy shade, but they are to me in the same sort of color family like the coral type shades, but you will see how much more red and watermelon the shade Electric Bloom is compared to Coral Cosmos. I think Coral Cosmos, depending on the undertones of your skin, is either going to pull a little bit more pink or a little bit more coral. In my case, when I put it on my skin, it just looks like a very bright, you know, very enlivening coral. But we are going to try both of these on my cheeks when I do the demos for these. But I just wanted to mention already now, do not be fooled by the swatches of these, and especially this one, which looks really pink on my skin. I actually quite like it. So now let's swatch the eyeshadows. I'm going to swatch first the matte eyeshadows, and then we're going to swatch the metallics and talk about the different like formulas, textures and duochromes that are present in here. But let's start with the mattes. So first up we have the shade Dawn Divinity, which is a cool toned lavender matte. I'm describing them, by the way, in my own way, not in the way that Pat describes them. I have no idea how she describes them. Then we've got this shade Forever Nude, which is kind of like a nudie brown shade, honestly. Then we have this shade Serene Sienna, which is a warmer brown, not very deep, sort of like a mid-tone brown, probably could be built up to be a bit darker. And finally we've got the shade Mythic Majesty, which I would describe as a mahogany brown, so a bit more like a red toned brown. This more orange tone, this is a bit more neutral, this is clearly quite cool toned. I think there's a really good variety of mattes in here, and I think I could use all of these. This one is a bit a question mark, but it looks similar to something that's in the Divine Rose 1 palette that I can almost pull off, but it is a little bit deeper than that, so I'm going to have to see whether this one really works for me. But overall I'm quite happy with the variety of the mattes that are present in here. And now let's watch the metallic shades. About the metallic eyeshadows, starting over here with the shade Opalescent Moonstone, which I hope you can detect is a very sheer, like salmony pink kind of base with an overlay of very fine glitter, which is a light blue sort of green shift. To me it looks more blue really than it looks green, but it is a very like pretty and ethereal shade. Then we have this very rich chocolate warm tone brown, which is the shade Eternal Bronze, of course. Then we've got the shade Fawn Fantasia, which is this one here, I think in the middle, which is more of like a nude peach beige kind of color. And then we've got the two greens, which of course were probably the most attractive thing about this palette. This is the shade Celestial Celadon, which is a very pale, sort of like silvery toned green. It's not a silver shade for sure, but it is also not like intensely green. Think of something like the green shade from Celestial Odyssey, which was much more intensely green, much more of like a warm grass kind of green. This is a cooler tone for sure. And now let's talk about this final shade here. This is the shade Emerald Eclipse. So as far as the formula goes, these are more of your traditional like metallics, sparkly metallic sort of duochrome shades. This one on the other hand is very interesting because it has that very lightweight texture, which almost feels like one of her baked shades, but without being one of her baked shades. It is extremely smooth and lightweight to the touch, and I am extremely impressed and intrigued by the formula of this shade. This is not like the other four. Like the other four are much more of like your classic type textures. This is different, and I quite like it. And I know immediately what you're thinking. Can you please compare this to the green shade in the Sublime palette? Yes, I am. I'm also trying to find a convenient angle to show you how these are looking under artificial lighting. So right now I am shining my phone light on them so that you can see that they're actually really pretty and sparkly. Oh yeah, look at that. So the first comparison that I personally am very curious to make is between the matte shades here. So this lavender cooler toned matte in the Divine Rose 1 palette versus this one. Immediately I can tell you this one in here looks a bit deeper in tone and maybe more similar to the one that was in the first Bridgerton. So I'm going to grab the first Bridgerton too. So this is the first Bridgerton. The first Bridgerton might be a little bit warmer in tone now that I'm looking. I think this one is quite much cooler tone. So this is the shade from Starstruck Splendor. This is Divine Rose 1. This is the first Bridgerton palette. And you can see that they're actually not really super similar to each other. This one is very purple and very like cool toned in its nature. This one is a bit more nude mauve. This is really quite like a lavender mauve. So I'm quite curious about this shade on the eye, and this is in fact quite much more plummy compared to the other ones. Now this shade here, the shade Opalescent Moonstone, I don't know that she has really done anything quite like it. The only sort of similar thing that I can think of is from one of the Star Wars palettes. So this was in the first Mega Mothership actually, if you don't have the Star Wars palettes, and that is this shade here, which is the shade Electron, but that is much more pink. This is a completely different kind of shade. So here we have the Bijoux Brilliance shade, and here we've got the shade from... No, they're completely different eyeshadows actually. No, there's really no comparison. I don't really have anything quite like this in my Pat McGrath eyeshadow collection, so we can call that, you know, unique. Nowadays it is hard for Pat to give us unique, but she has really given us something unique here. Now something that is not going to be unique is this brown shade here. As beautiful as it is, I think it is quite similar to this one here, which is the shade Bronze Eclipse. So let's quickly swatch them side by side. And I think even on my finger you can barely tell the difference. But this is the shade from the new palette. This is Starstruck Splendor, and this is Bronze Eclipse from the Celestial Odyssey palette. I think they're almost indistinguishable from each other. There is like a slight difference in the undertone, this one being a little bit more bronzy orange, whereas this one is a bit more like a red mahogany leaning bronze, but in the end of the day they are rather similar to each other in terms of texture, in terms of pretty much everything. Since I've got Celestial Odyssey here, I just wanted to demonstrate for you how much cooler in tone this green is compared, for example, to something else from a Mega Mothership that we have gotten before. So let's take this beautiful shade here. This is Something with Envy. Citrine Envy over here, which is one of my favorites from the Celestial Odyssey palette, but you can see immediately how much warmer it is. This is so much more like blue silver tone compared to this. So here we've got Celestial Odyssey. I really love the shade in Celestial Odyssey, but I'm also really happy to have something a little bit different from Pat. So I think this green shade is also quite unique to her. I also want to quickly compare to the mint eyeshadow that we got in the second Bridgerton palette, which is this one here, which might be a bit more similar to the new shade, but a bit more of like an actual like mint green. I don't know whether you can detect. This is much more of like a classic mint green, whereas this is more of like a silver sage cooler toned green. And now let's do the comparison that I think most of you are curious about, which is between Blitz Emerald in the Sublime palette and this new green, which I already forgot the name of, something with Emerald. Yeah, Emerald Eclipse in the Starstruck Splendor palette. Ouch. They're actually very different shades. This has more of like a forest green, emerald green sparkle to it, and the base tone is this extremely dark plummy purple, whereas this one is more of like a dark brown and the overlay is more of an olive green to lime green sort of sparkle. And with these two shades it's also really nice to see how different they are under artificial lighting. They are both glorious and gorgeous, but they're quite different from each other. Yay! But I'm telling you, some sort of magic has been happening here, because this eyeshadow feels almost like a baked shade. Okay, so now let's talk about the Quints. I picked them up as a bundle deal because I thought, you know what, if I end up not liking one of them, I'm either going to sell it or I'm going to pass it along to a friend. But in the end of the day, financially speaking, if I was going to pick up 3, which was my original plan, or the bundle, it didn't really make that much of a difference. So here we are. I have all the Quints and I'm going to swatch all of them for you. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm not going to do comparison swatches between the Quints and my other eyeshadow palettes that are not in the Quint formula. We are only going to compare between Quints here, because the Quints come in a very unique type of formula from Pat McGrath. She introduced that formula last year when she released the 2 Holiday Quints, Nude Allure and Bronze Bliss. I adore Bronze Bliss so much that I actually have a backup of it, and she further expanded this collection to also the 3 Quints that were released for the second Star Wars collaboration. The first thing I want to say before I forget is that if you guys were curious how these compare in terms of formula to the Star Wars versus the original formula that was present in the 2 Holiday Quints from last year, I think these are basically the same quality and the same formulas as these. The formula that was present in these Quints, the Star Wars Quints, which is this extremely creamy, very dense formula that wasn't really present in any of the original Quints, is not present, in my opinion, in any of the new Quints. And now, without any sort of rhyme or reason, I'm just going to start swatching the Quints. So first up, we're going to do my personal favorite and one of the Quints that I knew for sure I was going to pick up, which is the shade Bronze Ecstasy. Bronze Ecstasy is absolutely gorgeous. This is absolutely beautiful. I love the combination of the colors here, the beautiful neutral shades with this antique bronzy gold brown kind of shade. Absolutely delightful. This sort of like cooler toned brown, just this whole Quint spoke to me on so many levels, and it remains also my favorite. I will also tell you already, I took this with me to Germany on my work trip and I wore it there, and it is every bit as beautiful as I was hoping for. But let's quickly swatch. Again, I'm going to swatch the 2 sort of like matte eyeshadows first, And then I'm going to do the 3 metallics. These are a beautiful formula and gorgeous tones, and I have to say, this more like mahogany brown shade over here is more of like a satin. It's not really a true matte. It has a tiny bit of a sheen to it, but it is just such an elegant, beautiful formula. I absolutely love it. And then we have this sort of more, it looks more cool toned, but it's actually quite neutral when you get it in real life and you start using it. It is absolutely beautiful. I really love both of these. So the lightest one is your classic light pink champagne. Then we have this beautiful beigey peachy nude, and last but not least we have this gorgeous like darkened, like a very dark brown base, but brown, not black, with beautiful like antique bronze gold glitter. And here is an awkward angle of me trying to shine an artificial light source over top of these eyeshadows so that you can truly see them sparkle. They're so pretty. I personally really enjoy the combination of colors in here. I think this is a very versatile little quint because you can do something that is a little bit more pink toned if you put that shade here on your lids. You can go into like a more peachy, beigey direction. You can take it in a smokier direction. You can also mix and match in all sorts of ways, and the 2 mattes are absolutely beautiful and also different and flattering enough tones. I just love everything about this quint. So if there is one that I would highly recommend from the ones that I have tried so far on my eyes, this would be the one. Let's see if there is something similar if we compare. Ooh, there is something magnetic going on here. These are playing around with each other. Okay, I don't really see anything similar between the Bronze Ecstasy Quint and Nude Allure from last year. So there is that. And let's see, there is a shade in here that I would like to compare. So this is Bronze Bliss from last year. And I think this shade here would be interesting to compare to this one here from the new quint. So let me pick that one up. This shade has much more of like a chunky texture to the antique gold glitter, whereas this one is a lot smoother, but they are kind of in the same color family in my opinion. Second quint that I want to show you is the shade Sunset Romance, which was also very attractive to me because it looked like a very neutral, slightly pink leaning color story. I feel like in the promo pictures this looked a little bit more pink than it is in real life. I think in real life it is more of like a very beautiful combination of terracotta tones together with like very neutral pink tones. So let me quickly swatch this palette for you as well. I've already worn this one too and I really like it. So here we have Sunset Romance. We have this beautiful rich terracotta brown, this more neutral leaning pink, really pretty. Then we have this light champagne gold, a beautiful mid-tone neutral pink, and finally we have this beautiful sparkly peachy pinky terracotta shade. This actually reminds me quite a bit of Rosefire Nectar from the Voyeuristic Vixen quad, but I think the one in Voyeuristic Vixen actually has a strong like golden duochrome and a completely different formula. Actually, this is a different formula. Oh wow. You can see how much more like impactful Rosefire Nectar is and how much more of a strong like duochrome it has. I'm not saying this shade isn't glittery, it is quite glittery, but they're actually quite different, which is nice because at first I saw the two of them and I thought that they would be quite similar, but they are not. Sunset Romance is also really gorgeous. I really like the variety of the tones in here. I like that you have these like neutral sort of pinks, but you also have like the warmer terracotta side of shades, so you can vary your looks a little bit, but they are also quite like classic. They are very feminine, they're very romantic. Oh, let me see if there is something similar in the holiday quints from last year. I don't think Bronze Bliss has anything similar, and to be fair, and to be honest with you, I also don't think there's anything in Nude Allure that is quite like the shades in here. So no, nothing similar. Sunset Romance, very, very pretty. Next up we have the Quint that had everyone's knickers shaking. This is the shade Lunar Nightshade. Now Lunar Nightshade became super popular, I think mostly because of these two shades here. Two like blue-greeny shades over here that everyone was losing their mind. So let's quickly swatch this palette. This palette only has one matte eyeshadow, and that's this purpley maroon kind of shade. Now I have to say, when I swatch it with a little bit more intensity to this shade actually looks a bit more like a warm plummy purple than it really does a maroon. And I don't know whether you can see, but it has the tiniest bit of a blue sheen to it. So this is not a matte eyeshadow, this is more of like a satin matte, and it has definitely a bit of a blue satin duochrome going to it. It is actually quite interesting. So here is Lunar Nightshade for your viewing pleasure. I am shining a little bit of an artificial light so that you can see some of the interesting shifts and sparkles that are going on in this palette. So I'm actually quite curious how this one is going to go on the eyes, because I do actually enjoy most of the shades that are in here. This is really the only question mark. This is a neutral champagne, there's really nothing to say about it. This is a beautiful, sparkling, like more cooler toned pink champagne, like a taupey pink champagne, if that makes any sense to you. Think of pink champagne from Anastasia Beverly Hills, but then make it the Pat McGrath Labs Quint version of that. Then we have this shade here, which is something that I was initially quite skeptical about, and I think I might change my mind, because this is one of those classic like black eyeshadows with a lot of sparkle in it, and the sparkle obviously is like teal blue. And initially I was really skeptical that I'm going to like this, but when I touched it and I felt the creaminess of the base color and how there's literally zero fallout, I immediately fantasized about using this eyeshadow as a liner in the bases of my lashes, and now I'm actually quite excited to use it. Then finally we have this shade here, and I think this one is either going to be something that you're really excited about or something that you're going to be really disappointed with, because this is a very like light sea foam blue-green kind of shade. It's more blue really than it is green, with a golden duochrome to it. I have had shades like this from indie eyeshadow companies, so I have seen this kind of duochrome before, but if you were expecting this to be like a very intense green shade or blue shade or mint shade, it is really neither of those. And before we wrap this video up, let's quickly talk about the Quint that piggybacked on the rest. So the other three Quints I wanted to buy and I really wanted to own. This one was the only one that I wasn't really sure that I'm going to like. This is the shade Bordeaux Bliss. I still don't know whether I'm going to like this Quint, but I remain quite intrigued by it. So let's watch it. I'm not going to give you any sort of like final opinion on this Quint because I really can't tell which way this is going to go. We're going to have to put it on the eyes and see how it goes. But the interesting thing about this Quint is there really isn't a true matte eyeshadow in here, because you're getting this sparkling black base with like red, intense red golden glitter. I'm hoping that this is being picked up on the camera. I'm really hoping that this is coming across on camera. And the other shade that kind of looks matte in her swatches, but it really isn't a matte, is this one here. It is a very interesting tone of purple, but there is glitter in here, okay? This is a matte with glitter. I do not know what is going on. I thought we had abandoned making formulas like this. Apparently we have not. And here is Bordeaux Bliss for your viewing pleasure, with me desperately trying to find an angle to shine an artificial light on it so that you can see all the different sparkles that are going on in these eyeshadows. So let's first talk about this black shade here with the red glitter. It is the same kind of texture and formula as the eyeshadow that we discussed just now from the Lunar Nightshade. So this is something new. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but again, I'm fantasizing about using this one as a liner and hoping that the glitter is going to stick around. Then we have this like lighter pink champagne metallic shade, this more sparkly, again kind of like a neutral pink, but there's definitely blue glitter in here. Then we have this light plum matte shade which has gold glitter in it, which I cannot quite explain what exactly the purpose of this shade is, because in my experience when you blend out these sort of formulas the glitter flies away, so it is completely pointless. And if you apply glitter glue, the matte type of base of this eyeshadow becomes weird, so you can't really make the glitter stick. So this one gives me an error. I don't know what to do with this one. I'm going to use it as a matte and I'm going to disregard the glitter in here. And finally we have this like fiery red sparkly duochromy kind of shade, which has again like a rather dark base to it, but it flips to like this fiery orangey red glitter. It is actually quite similar to the one in Sunset Romance, but it is a bit more of like a fiery red. Let me quickly look whether there's anything similar in last year's Quints. Okay, maybe this light pink champagne from the Nude Allure would be considered similar to the one from Lunar Nightshade, but this is a little bit lighter. This is actually quite much deeper in tone. I really want to swatch, where is Sunset Romance? I want to swatch these two shades next to each other because they look rather similar, don't they? So this is the shade from Sunset Romance, which I'm going to swatch right next to the one from Bordeaux Bliss. So you can see this is more like a terracotta peachy flip, and this is more like a fiery red orange, but they are quite similar. Then we had this pink champagne shade also in Lunar Nightshade, which looks a bit like this one, but I think they are different. Oh yeah, this is so much like cooler, almost taupe leaning. This is a very interesting shade. This one from Lunar Nightshade really intrigues me. It is beautiful. This one is more of like a classic pink champagne, but let me quickly swatch this one next to, well, not next to, but right here in between. Oh yeah, do you see how much more silvery taupe this is? This is more like a light mauve purple almost. Interesting. Once again, I have over an hour of footage. I'm very curious how this video is going to come along together. Hopefully it was useful to you and you were able to get a pretty good idea of what these eyeshadow palettes look like in real life, because I do think that some of them look quite different in real life. Right now I cannot tell you whether I would recommend anything, yes or no. The only two that I would wholeheartedly recommend are Sunset Romance and Bronze Ecstasy, because I think they're beautiful. And that is in case you like the formula that was present in the Quints. But I can't really make any statements about the rest of the palettes because I haven't really tried them on my eyes yet. So let's do that next week. I hope this video was useful to you and enjoyable. If there are any further questions, comparison swatches between specific shades you would like me to do, then do let me know. In the meantime, thank you so much for hanging out and I will see you in my next video. Bye!